Welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our LGPS Policy Insight Webinar. It's all about people, how to recruit and retain talent. So if we haven't had the pleasure to meet, I'm Tiffany Tsang, Head of DB, LGPS and Investment at the PLSA, and it's my pleasure to be your chair today. In one of our 4 modules of research work, which we'll talk through shortly, staff recruitment retention was one of the key issues highlighted and came through actually throughout all of the modules in different ways. In our June report, Today's Challenges, Tomorrow's Opportunities, and we'll be delving further into this complex talent management issue together. We'll discuss, sorry, I'm still recovering a bit from COVID, so I might cough a little bit during the session. We'll discuss how we can build on the report's recommendations and help LGPS funds to find the staff they need and to retain that staff in a fast-changing work environment. So it's something that we can all relate to, those of you in the audience today. We are luckily joined today by an array of experts, including 2 graduate finance trainees, to share their experiences with the LGPS, which is very exciting. First, to give you a very quick outline of what to expect over the next 40 minutes, we'll start with a summary of the report's talent management findings, what the challenges are, and hear about some of the recommendations from the report. Next, we'll hear from Johanna Smith, Entry to Work Recruitment Lead, Essex County Council on Early Career Recruitment, who will give us a case study on what she has seen works. She will then also introduce us to her 2 graduate finance trainees, Peter Herring and Yatunde Akiode, who will give you some of their own reflections on their time working with LGPS. After that section, we will then have Richard Sultana, Head of Pensions Administration, Worcestershire Pension Fund. He'll be speaking on developing a strategy to promote a career in pensions to help aid in retention. Finally, last but certainly not least from our speakers, we'll have our new chair of the PLSA's Local Authority Committee, Neil Mason, who is Assistant Director for Surrey Pension Fund, and he'll be sharing with us about what's been working well and what needs attention in his own fund. So as always, we'll leave some time at the very end for some questions to the panel at the very end. So please do jot them down in the Q&A box during the session. I'll keep an eye on it throughout our talk, and then we'll come back to the audience portion of it at the very end. So now next, can I have the next slide? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to give a very brief overview of the talent management findings. And you're not here to see me today, you're here to hear our wonderful experts on their experiences. So I'll try and get through this section as quickly as possible. This is really just to set the context of today's conversation. Just to note as well, the slides are deliberately far more detailed than I will actually cover. This is just so that if you want to go back in your time and inspect them more closely and have a chat with us later about the research, we can do that. So on to the next slide, please. Fantastic. So this is one of those slides where there's more detail than I'm actually going to cover. This is really just as a prompt to remind us that the aim of the project really was to understand the risks and challenges facing the scheme, to really better future-proof the long-term sustainability of the LGPS, and also to celebrate and build on its many successes. The next slide, please. So this one here really is just to remind us that there are 4 main modules. You can see them on the screen very clearly there. We'll be focusing today on module 4, operational sustainability, which is where a lot of the people and talent management stuff really came through in our interviews and workshops and survey work as well. The reason why I've got another arrow next to the first module is because actually all the modules really intertwine in lots of ways. There's lots of knock-on effects. And for our purposes today with people and talent management, there's actually a direct connection, which you'll see in a second what I mean by that, with the complex regulatory environment that we talked about in module 1. So on to my next slide, please. Okay, so increasing complexity of LGPS roles to execute. One of the joys of the work that we did for me were the many conversations we had with the people in the audience, I think, as well, throughout this piece of work. Really, our research and the quotes you see up here now are your stories that have come through, and I hope that you can see that when you read through the quotes. I won't go through all of them. That's for you to read at your own time when you have a chance. But what these quotes really represent for me is some of the frustration that's been coming through in our membership in the LGPS about how the complexity of regulation has really made it so much more difficult for you to get the staff that you need. Increasingly, you need highly skilled staff with very specific specializations. And in fact, some participants of the research even told us that they had staff resign in recent times, which is not what we want to hear, because the onslaught of regulatory complexity. So McLeod judgment was a constant thing that came up for those who fell into that bracket and saying, oh, it's just too much at the moment. So we are working through in ways that we can address that as well. So on to the next slide. Okay, so again, this slide here is just to help give a broad overview to set the context of the kind of what the operating environment is like that you're trying to recruit people into. And the great news is that the story is overwhelmingly positive. So for instance, just to pull a stat from the screen that I can see, 88% said they made efforts to improve recruitment, for instance, and 43% of you said that the best part of working at the LGPS was your colleagues. I mean, how amazing is that, right? But then the flip side of that is 22% of you felt that the ability to secure resources has actually gotten worse, which is a strong barrier highlighted in the research amongst the kind of barriers and challenges that we're seeing in the space of recruitment, retention, and resourcing. On to my next slide, please. So these next two slides are all about the barriers, which is a little bit of a downer for just a second. So just bear with me because we've got some positive news coming up ahead, which will fill the next 35-ish minutes actually. But it's important to understand what some of the frustrations are that we heard in the research. So again, a collection of your quotes and stories here. I won't read them out loud, but you can look at them as I'm speaking, and you can go back to them in your own time as well. But really, for me, some of these quotes I pulled out represent three main areas that we're feeling a lot of frustration come through. So one is with the council processes and pay bands set by administrative authorities and local authorities, and for good reason. A lot of the processes and pay band restrictions have evolved to be in this space for good reason, but for our purposes, it causes quite a lot of hindrance to what we're trying to achieve in recruiting and retention. So location is another biggie. Post-pandemic has become even more of an issue, actually, as I'm sure this is quite intuitive for a lot of people with hybrid working, remote working, really, and everyone's competing for the same resource. It's become even more difficult when people can apply. Anyone can apply for any job anywhere almost these days. Pay has always been an issue for as long as I've been working with the PLSA. Members have said to us it's very difficult to compete with the private sector, so no change there really. Next slide, please. Okay, so for this one here, so just to kind of continue on the issue of barriers, for those of you who were asked the question of reasons for not having the right staff in place, unsurprisingly, 88% said the reason why you didn't have the right staff in place was recruiting issues, difficulty in recruiting. Over half, 59%, said that required skills for roles have changed. So remember, that links us back to module 1 about the complexity of the regulatory environment, so that they go hand in hand. Almost half, 47% of you, also mentioned low pay and rewards. So again, we touched on that on the previous slide as well, and the quotes that came through. Next slide, please. Okay, so we are rounding the bend, not too many more from me. So this slide here is just to summarize some of the key challenges, barriers that we've just discussed. So I won't go through all of them here, but things that feel familiar, the regulatory complexity, having difficulty securing internal resources, and fierce competition over competitive wages as well. So next slide. So we've got two more. We're very nearly there. Okay, so for this one, just very quickly, recommendations of the report. There were 24 in total. We can't go through all of them here. For our purposes, there were 6 for this module, just to kind of give you a flavor of what they look like. And they aren't all for the PLSA to take forward as well. Some of them for other stakeholders that we are recommending that they take forward. A best practice case study for talent management. So doing more of what we're starting to do today, which is to share with one another what works, what doesn't work, ideas, and what could work. A second recommendation is a central support network that could help with recruitment across the country. Number 3, begin a conversation with government and regulators on how the complexity of regulation is actually driving people away from the LGPS at the moment, and use as a starting point to try and start to streamline compliance issues. Long-term goal, but it's something that we'll chip away at. The fourth rec is reframing the language, which I'll talk about more in the next and final slide, really to describe a career in pensions and the LGPS in a different way. The 5th one is raising the profile of the LGPS with a variety of stakeholders, which could help actually with getting the competitive wages possibly that you need within your administrative authorities. And then the 6th recommendation here is that government really should give everyone in the LGPS a greater articulation and lead in timeline of requirements for longer run up to achieving them, so that you can work sooner and have more time to secure the resource that you need. So on to my last and final slide here. So here, I just want to leave you with this thought, that a quote that came through that was always very powerful for me was, the LGPS is different and special, but it doesn't always get that recognition. So I think that applies to in to lots of different stakeholders in lots of different areas. But for our purpose today, I think the way that we talk about the LGPS perhaps could be different, because as you saw earlier, nearly half of you say going to work to be with your colleagues is one of the best things about working there. And maybe instead of talking about, saying, do you want to work for the LGPS, or, local government or local pensions, maybe the way to reframe it is, don't you want to work for a scheme that manages £350 billion of money and that does good for society, and you have a flexible collegiate environment? So that was some of the conversation that came through in our workshops about a year ago. So I'm going to stop there. I am going to, just on my slide after this one, you'll see that's a link to the report. You can go back and look at it in your own time. I'm going to invite Johanna to come back on screen, and I will go off screen. She will now give her overview of her early career program and then introduce her two graduate finance trainees, Peter and Yatunde. So thank you. Johanna, over to you.
Lovely. Thanks, Tiffany. And hopefully I'll do this justice. That was a lot of information there. So I'll be honest, mine's not as in-depth, my slides. I also, as Tiffany just rightly said, I have Peter and Yatunde with me today. They are our graduates. And as much as I will talk to you about entry to work and who we are and what we do, I think it's really vital that people actually hear from graduates who are living and breathing one of our pathways that we have here. So just a bit of background, the Entry to Work team, we were created within Essex County Council in January 2021. We are a team of 5. That team is made up of myself, my 2 consultants, one of which is an apprentice himself, studying a level 5. And I also have another level 3 apprentice in my team and a previous Kickstart as my recruitment coordinator. For us as a team, it's really important that if we're talking about entry pathways into the organisation, we also practice what we preach, and the team are fantastic. So next slide, please. So just a really quick brief overview. These are the pathways that my team oversee. So there are 10 pathways into Essex County Council, as well as the business as usual repeaters of recruitment. So regarding that one itself, obviously Kickstart has now finished. But you can see how busy we like to be. Our graduates, we also have now just started doing the 10,000 Black interns. We've just made our pledge. So we're very keen to see where that programme leads us, and obviously the retention of the interns afterwards. Next slide, please. Lovely. So just before we go into the graduate side of things for the pensions, I think it's really important to just highlight what so far the pensions team within Essex have done for early careers. So we've had 2 students undertake the virtual work experience with us, 7 individuals join on the Kickstart scheme, and obviously, as I mentioned before, I've got Peter and Yatunde with me. Just on that, actually, Tiffany obviously just mentioned that 88% showed they had difficulty to recruit staff. Just to put it in context, the 2022 grad campaign, we received for 2 positions over 250 applications. And I think that is due to obviously having a team who will manage everything. We also revised our job descriptions and had the digital brochures to help applicants along the way. The digital brochure itself had various topics that were relevant to the grads, not necessarily public sector, if I'm honest. It was more about, what does a grad want to know? What's a day in the life of? What are they going to study? What's the community there? What's the chances of being retained and progressed within Essex County Council as well? So I do think that really helped our campaign. But next slide, please. In regards to graduates themselves, just so it's more for everyone's understanding, they join us on a 3-year programme and they study towards a level 7 apprenticeship as well. So the apprenticeship itself is the accountancy or taxation professional qualification. The levy will pay for that. So it's £21,000 that we pay per graduate that we have here. Once the graduate is qualified, after 3 years, they're eligible to apply for membership of any of those below bodies as well. The link at the bottom is the link to the apprenticeship standard, as I say, the level 7, which is the equivalent of having your master's qualification. So it's very attractive for graduates. Next slide, please. So there are certain elements that I would recommend to making sure your grad campaign is as successful as it can be. And I'll just go into each of those a little bit more, but hopefully the pictures will sort of show you where we obviously position our grads and what we actually involve the grads with. So with the inclusive culture itself, Because grads bring a fresh perspective to work, we actively encourage graduates to be vocal during our meetings, sharing their ideas. We also ask and encourage the grads to come and join us on the career events. So if we're presenting at a university, a college, or even a school, we'll ask the grads to join us. But we'll also have them assist us with our graduate recruitment campaign. So Peter and Yatunde, who are on the call today, will be helping us with the 2023 campaign. They've lived it, they've breathed it. It's absolutely more credible from a candidate point of view to have people who understand everything. Where we have the peer-to-peer support and networking, we have a entry to work community group where all graduates are able to join, and that's a chance for them to share their experiences, challenges, concerns. Some individuals had to relocate when they've joined Essex, so it's that sort of the community and the support that we have in place there. We also have various social events, so our coffee and catch up. We've got one next month, doing our cookie decorating. Obviously, budgets aren't that big within local government, so cookie decorating it is, but it's just a chance for the grads to come meet with each other, discuss, have a coffee, have the catch up, and again, face-to-face contact is important. Regarding networking with the wider business, we like to think that our graduates are the leaders of the future. So we will always promote graduates to do that networking. We'll also have coffee with the leader, which is actually the final image that you can see at the bottom of the slide there. That's with Kevin Bentley, who is the leader of Essex County Council. And the rotations of placements, to keep it fresh, to keep it exciting, it's so important to rotate during the placements within the business itself. It broadens the experience and the knowledge as well for the graduates, and with the ideal that have a specialism in the final year. Next slide, please. And this is the example of the rotation itself. It's a very colourful slide, so I hope you've all got your sunglasses on. So we have 5 areas of rotation. Obviously, you can see there: management accounting, employer team, investment team, compliance, and single payments. The rotations last anything between 5 to 10 months in length, and they're a mixture of in-person and virtual itself. So next slide, please. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Peter and Yatunde, who will then talk about their experiences. So they're here today to talk about what they've done so far on their placement, what they've enjoyed, what does a day in the life look like, what is that reality of that one, and how they balance the work-life balance and completing an apprenticeship at the same time. So Peter, Yatunde, please come on camera, and I will leave it over to yourselves.
I'll start. I'm Peter. I've been in the grad program since June now, and I've just been really enjoying it here. It's a very welcoming and supportive workplace. I joined after graduating from University of Essex. I studied actuarial science, so I was quite keen to put everything I learned into practical use, and ECC has quite a lot of development opportunities which sort of appealed to me. And on a personal level, I applied to the private sector, but I think I'd still opt for public sector because I'm just weighing up the benefits versus the salary and professional development I mentioned earlier. It's just, I want to do my best for an organisation that's investing so much into me. And as I said, everyone's so friendly and helpful in the office. I was kind of worried a bit about I didn't have so much financial experience, and everyone's just so helpful, and they train you on the job, and anything you need to do, they help you. And I've on my 9th week now of the SIPFA lectures, and I'm on my first rotation. So I've moved from investment team to employer team. Every morning I log in, I check my emails to see if I've got anything to do or need to reply to them. And then we generally have a meeting Mondays or Tuesdays, and then I'll carry out the tasks from Monday to Wednesday, doing what I said I'd need to be doing, anything I've been set. And then Thursdays, Fridays, they're my lecture days for SIPFA. I'm currently studying financial accounting and management accounting. These are the first modules we all study with SIPFA, and they're very heavily linked with what we initially do at ECC, which is very useful. And the lecture days, they're pretty helpful. We have about 6 hours solid of lectures, but we have an hour break in between, which is nice. And also we have 10 minutes, 15 minutes in between each sort of quarter lecture, which gives you a chance to have a comfort break, make a cup of tea. And it's been really interesting actually, learning things in my studies and seeing them actually in work. It's been really cool to see. That's sort of what I wanted to do, and the fact I've got it is just, it's brilliant, and I've been loving it. Yeah, pass to you, Tunde.
You can see you're excited there, Peter. Yeah, it's great. Yetunde, what about yourself?
Hiya, so my name's Yetunde. I joined in August. I'm a bit different to Peter. I only graduated this year. So I think for me, it's been a really big transition because it's like I've just come out of uni. But I think the way the team has organized the grad scheme has definitely made it a lot easier for me. Not only do my managers have regular check-ins with me, but other senior colleagues that I work with as well, they're always asking me, am I okay? They encourage me to ask questions. So I don't feel like I need to go into the office knowing everything. It's very much, if you don't understand something, we're here to help you. And I would say my favorite part about the grad scheme so far, I would say, is the pace of it. Because the rotations aren't 2 months, 3 months, they generally range from 5 months to a year. It helps you get to grips with your tasks. You don't feel like you're just doing lots of different things, but you feel like you can actually perfect a skill before moving on to something else. And in terms of the balance between studying and working, I would say flexible working for me personally has definitely helped with that, because the days that I do work from home, I can log off, relax for maybe an hour, get something to eat, and then study, especially because I don't live in Chelmsford and I commute from London. So the flexible working has definitely helped with the balance of studying and working. So I think a graduate scheme is a very good way to help keep retention, because not only are you easing people into the work life, but you're also investing in them because, for example, they're paying for us to get an extra qualification. So that development and investment into individuals, I definitely think it helps them feel valued and want to do their job more. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Tiffany, back to yourself.
Thank you so much. That was actually very inspiring. And I have lots of questions. I'm going to wait to ask my questions later. So I hope you're thinking about your questions as well in the audience. I would like to ask Richard to please come on screen. He will be walking us through the development of a roadmap for a career in pensions for retention. So Richard, over to you.
Hi, thanks, Tiffany. So just a bit of introduction to myself. I'm Richard Sultana, and I've just recently joined from the last 4 or 5 months Worcestershire Pension Fund as Head of Pensions Administration. I think one of the things upon joining the fund that I realised is that the fund has a really good culture in terms of a work-life balance. Upon joining, we have gone through a restructure of the fund. So essentially, we've added around about 13 additional posts to the fund. And as part of this restructure, and upon me joining, I took the opportunity to have one-to-ones with each of the staff to kind of understand what they liked about the fund, what they wanted to get out of the restructure, and where they saw themselves going within the fund. One of the things that came out of my conversations with them is that retention of staff at Worcestershire isn't an issue, or we don't really lose many staff. But the problem that came with that was a double-edged sword, is that some of the feedback was that they felt that development was hindered in as much as, because people didn't move on, they didn't really have the chance to move into these posts. So the way that we worked to restructure, we had the expression of interest come through for internal staff. We encouraged internal staff to apply for these positions. Now, one of the things that we did do is our governance engagement and projects all sat under one person. So we'd expanded this post to 10 people within there. One of the things that myself and the other managers had to do was really let the rest of the team know what these kind of posts entailed, because everyone was so good at working on what they're working on. They're empowered to work on their own work split, works really well. They're conscientious. They kind of get the work done. But what we found is that they didn't really understand what the governance and projects team would do, what the communications team would do, and the employer engagement side. So one of the things that we had to do was kind of speak to them on their on an individual basis, explain what the different roles, where they saw an interest from the job specs. And like anyone, if you look at a job spec, sometimes it can be quite daunting of all the roles. So us as leaders there to kind of inspire confidence within these people, to show what kind of work that they do would transition into these areas. We went through the expression of interest process, and as it turned out, a number of the roles were filled, and everybody kind of shuffled up in terms of the pension fund. So it's left us a number of roles at grades 4 and 5. One of the things that we have done, and we made a promise to these people, that to our staff, is that once the structure's in place, their development won't stop. So where people may have been unsuccessful in some of the roles, or we're not quite confident enough to go for them, as part of their development plans, we're giving them aspects of that role. So if somebody comes to me and says, you know, I'm quite an open person, I like to talk to people, and we say, well, have you thought about the engagement side? We give them elements of that if they would like to kind of develop an employer responsibilities workshop, and to kind of give them the exposure to it. One, to show what the kind of work entails if they went for that, but also to be able to sign off if they go for a job like that within the service again, that they have the actual experience to do so. And I think this comes from being, you know, communicating and open with your staff about what they want to get from the job that they're in. One of the other aspects to us is we've redesigned our development plan. So we have the monthly one-to-one development plans, but instead of assessing obviously the technical aspect of the role, we ask about their interests, and we look about the behavioural. So does somebody have high attention to detail? Could they be aligned with more the regulatory side? Would that be something that they'd be interested in looking at, going through the regs, seeing, you know, if the governance side of things would work? And like I mentioned previously, in terms of how we look at employer engagement, you know, are they outgoing with really strong interpersonal skills? They may be, you know, doing a work split within deferreds and estimates, but if we don't understand what the person is as a person, we could potentially lose them to another organization or another employer where they could maybe build on these strengths that come naturally to them. So I think in terms of how we're doing, we're really trying to focus on the person themselves. We trust our training methods. It's so hard, and you know, to recruit people with pensions knowledge, but myself and the rest of the team, we trust that when people come and join us, we've created an environment where work-life balance is the most important thing to us. As I mentioned before, people are empowered to work within their work split, how they do. You know, they understand the work themselves, they understand the priorities. We don't micromanage. And I think it's just about making sure that once somebody is happy in doing what they're doing, and giving them the opportunities to experience the different types of work, that they can really go on to push with that. Where I mentioned before about recruitment, the current vacancies that we have, we're recruiting to, but we find a lot of success comes from staff referrals. So a lot of our recruitment is fairly successful because staff refer, you know, other friends, and we have family members who have joined as well. And we tend to get our turnover of staff in that way. One area we are working with is the apprenticeship side for our grade 4, which tend to be the entry-level roles. We're talking with our L&D team. We're investigating the apprenticeship route, and that's the route we're going to go down. But we already have existing relationships with our employers, some of the higher education establishments. So we're reaching out to them as well and seeing if there's any way that we can promote that through them with this existing relationship. And I think fundamentally, rounding back to how we want to develop people, is showing through the restructure how people have moved up within roles, giving them a clear way of, if they want to experience something, this is how they can experience it. We will give them the opportunity to. It's so easy in pensions administration to think, well, everything's going right, it's all hands on deck, you know, processing casework. Sometimes you have to take a little bit of a short-term, you know, hitting work to make sure that the staff are getting exposure to areas, because in the long term, it's going to make it a lot easier keeping staff with the technical knowledge that you need, as opposed to, you know, going externally for that. I think that's probably it for me.
That's fantastic, Richard. Again, another really engaging and inspiring talk. Really, the thing I was writing some notes, and as you were talking, and things around the individualized approach. something you said here about, if we don't understand them as people, I mean, I just think that that's so important and really great. But we'll come back to all of that. That's really fantastic. So thank you so much. I'd like to now ask Neil to come on screen. Thank you so much, Neil. He will now give us his reflections on what's working, what's not working so well in his own fund. So Neil, over to you.
Thanks, Tiffany. And as always, I feel a little bit of a fraud coming to these events because I always take away much more than I seem to contribute. And I think Johanna and Richard's two presentations were absolutely fascinating and really showing the new wave of recruitment and really sort of forward thinking in the industry, which is great to see. It was quite sobering this morning, and if anybody else was listening to the Today program, where the reports were that private sector pay is now at least three times more than public sector pay. And I think we will always centre on pay when we talk about recruitment and retention, but it needs to be more than that. And I thought I'd just give you a little bit of an insight into the journey that we've been on at the Surrey Pensions team. And I seem to have been recruiting for an age. We started a huge transformation program at Surrey about 18 months ago, right in the teeth of COVID, which I would say was obviously a unique set of circumstances, and we are starting to see some changes in the recruitment landscape as we move hopefully through to more sort of normality. And I suppose if I take one message is from our recruitment campaign was be brave, make difficult decisions, make sure you are getting the right people, and it speaks to both Richard and Johanna's presentations, and I suppose we've combined with growing our own with a little bit of going and buying from the florist as well, and making sure we've got the best that we can in the marketplace. Some reflection on the different roles in the LGPS, and they're not all the same. We've recently been recruiting for leadership roles where a year ago I had a short list of three, and I was probably pushing it a bit there. And we're currently going back to the marketplace for a permanent on that role, and I could honestly have shortlisted 50 brilliant applicants. So something is changing out there. I think that the LGPS is relatively attractive in the marketplace at the moment, when we're in a position where there are different economic challenges. So what's the secret? I think if there is a secret, you really need an ambitious and engaged senior leadership team in your organisation. It's clear from Johanna and Richard's presentations that they've got that at Essex and Worcester. By that, there needs to be some understanding and willingness to accept some of the good governance recommendations. And again, we sort of return into having some flexibility in how you put together a reward for your staff. But I've spoken about pay a couple of times, and I think it needs to be more than that to make your organisation attractive. You have to have, wherever possible, you have to have your own unique selling point. For Surrey, it really was attracting staff who could really see a real clear articulation of the vision of our organisation. so quite often we were looking for a combination of technical excellence, yes, but also behaviors of the people we want in our organization is second to none. It's really is the priority. We push that through with an induction program, and the vision of Surrey is that, and I'll bore anybody if they want to talk about this, and I keep going on, and people are generally bored right now, but it's talking about the journey of the pound note. Is that everybody whether you're in administration or you're in the head of investments, or you're doing the annual FRS 102 returns, or you're doing the employer returns to the pensions regulator, everybody is connected. Everybody has a connection, a chain where everybody is really important in delivering pension benefits for our members, and the customer has to come at the heart of everything we do. So one of the ways in which we look to embed that is we have, to use football parlance, we have sweepers, and everybody understands how a sweeper works. It can come across different areas of the field, and that in our experience of pensions, we've got roles where we give our team members the opportunity to work, as I say, in the service delivery, what we would call admin, in the accounting and the governance team, also working on projects and change management, and also working on the investment space. So that's what's worked for us. I mean, I do think we need to keep a watching brief on it, because our experience of recruitment is very different across all the different areas of the business. I've mentioned we've got change management, and that is a very different person you're looking for somebody you're coming in to do technical work on the administration. But we're still on our journey, and it's not perfect, but hopefully that's helped colleagues understand how we've tried to approach it at Surrey.
Thank you so much, Neil. That was really great. I mean, I love the way that you've phrased it as, the way that we've done it so far in the conversation. There's, growing our own is part of that, but then also buying a little bit from the florist as well. I really love that. And the kind of idea, the overarching idea of being brave and being bold and having a senior management team that is really going to make ambitious decisions about the attracting the right people, and isn't just about pay. And so I think it's really important to keep in mind all of that while we bring the rest of our wonderful panel back on screen, please. And it's really fantastic. We're right on time. We have 6 minutes for Q&A. And I've been jotting notes down. I think this is really great. I'm already kind of getting some ideas for what kind of research we could be doing next at the PLSA. And I see we have a question as well that's come through, which is fantastic. So I guess I'd like to start actually with a question that's been asked by Joe Thistlewood, because I think it's a really important one, and I think it's cross-cutting across everyone on the panel. So Joe's asked a really important question about really the experience of a small fund. So she's here said that, because they are a small fund, they have very limited resources, perhaps even more so than others around the scheme, around the country. So both financially and existing staffing, they're already struggling to get the business as usual done, let alone the new requirements. So again, that comes back to our first module that we were just discussing about the increasing regulatory complexity. So what do? They don't have the people to grow. They don't have time to train new people. There aren't enough hours in the day, which I know is a feeling that we can all relate to. So it goes back to some of that kind of phrases that I've written down here, work-life balance. It is so difficult with what you have. So any advice on our panel for Joe there from your expertise and what's worked and not worked?
I think we're the same kind of thing, to be honest, Joe, as at Worcestershire. We're a smallish fund. I think one of the easiest ways that we find is when new people start, they create notes. So what we've done is collated everybody's notes into one document, which is essentially a 15, 20 page, 20 chapter document, and it basically outlines the procedure, following the task list. We use Altair, following the workflow task list, and then the actions on each one. That tends to help, especially in a remote kind of situation that we're in, where you don't have somebody next to you all the time to ask. That seems to be, we do also take on other modules from third parties to help with training, but I find that the most effective way, because it gives the person, you show them once, it gives them the run through, and then after a couple of cases it's checked and then fed back. That tends to be where we get the most success.
That's fantastic. And anyone else?
Just chip in. I think there are examples out there, and particularly the London funds who are much smaller. I've got experience of London funds, having been involved in the London Pensions Officers Group for many years, and it's quite common that members of that fund will, they'll be doing audit on a Tuesday, capital accounts on a Wednesday, and then pension fund for the rest of the week. And I do see that changing a bit, but I suppose to the question wasn't, well, let's hope things change. The question was, how can we improve things now? And I do think that for the smaller funds to work on collaborating with other colleagues in the business is really important. The Pensions Officers Group, the technical group, are absolutely invaluable resources. And without wishing to plug our hosts, also the PLSA, working within that group with the local government committee, making sure that your voice is heard on that forum, and sharing, stealing, plagiarizing, that's all part of the LGPS. So don't feel you can't do it, and because we're all a community that seeks to help each other, because we go as a fund, as a scheme, we go as fast as our slowest members, and it's really important.
Well said, Neil. I think that the emphasis on community, because that's something that I've always felt. So LGPS is somewhat new to me. I've only been working in this space for about 5 years, which I think is considered a baby, basically, working in LGPS. But the community really, I think, is spectacular. The sharing of knowledge is really fantastic. I just want to also come back to Peter and Yatunde, because it's so rare for us to meet you. So if you could, I'd really love to hear from both of you. If you could choose one thing on what you've experienced, would you say this is something that would make me really want to stay in the LGPS and really want to make a career here? Peter, Yatunde, anyone?
Yatunde's gone for a meeting, unfortunately, so
I'll shame. Okay.
I'll
right, Peter,
answer
you
for
take
her. It's a hard question, actually. It might just be as simple as, like, if everyone is just so helpful, and actually further to what Richard said about guidance notes, that's something I really do. And if I'm being taught something, I will write it down, make my own notes, so I can look back at it and refer to it later. And even if I need to be retrained on something, then I can just go back through the guidance notes and check off that I've actually have written this down, which is really helpful. And it makes me feel more confident doing these like tasks by myself, and also the knowledge that not so much a safety net, but that someone can help me if I do get to that stage. But also personally for me, I'd probably do as much as I could before I did ask for help. But it is good to know that there is someone there, and they always, it's happened at least twice, 3 times. Someone said, "I'd rather you ask a question than actually just sit there and just be panicking," because you don't need to. They'd much rather you ask for help than just sit there and struggle. So I'd really appreciate that from a work point of view.
That's really fantastic. Thank you so much, Peter. I see questions come through from the audience. How is the rising inflation impacting your operations, and are you having to adjust salaries to attract and retain staff? So, important, timely question. Any thoughts from anyone on that one? No?
No,
okay, well,
I mean, we are probably, one of the funds, we're not the best, we don't pay the best, we're comparable in our area. I think for us, it's like I mentioned before, we really find success through staff referrals. So engaging with our staff, do they have anybody that maybe has transferable skills? But ultimately, I've found LinkedIn is really important to build your network and to share information on there. I think that's a really a key one for us. But in terms of I think it's promoting obviously the development of what we can give staff when they come in, and the progression that can be given to try and retain. And like Peter said, having a close-knit team that you can call upon. It is that work-life balance that I think for us is trying to retain them. But recruiting, it's getting out to as many people as you can. But referrals are our key, I think.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
I mean, talking to the inflation question, Tiffany, obviously we're sort of, we're all sort of bargaining on a national level. I think the priority is for the organisation to recognise the cost of living crisis we're in, and make sure that our response, where possible, is proportionate to ensure that the lower paid of our cohort of staff have got the support wherever it's possible. And I also suppose that one of our roles as pensions professionals in the LGPS is to make sure that we're providing education not just to the staff that are in our team, but the wider council staff about what options you've got with your pension, because it can easily, because that will be a problem if people start opting out the schemes in large numbers. That's going to be a big cash flow burden on the scheme, and maybe just give that that sort of educational piece about, maybe we can use 50/50 for what it was meant for, rather than senior officers avoiding annual allowance charges. Did I say that?
Thank you, Neil. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time. Can you believe it? I feel like we could go on talking for ages about this. But before we close out, I know my colleagues won't kill me if I just ask everyone to just answer one quick question. So pick one thing in the next 10 seconds. I know we've talked about a lot about the things that have made a difference. So if you pick one thing, I know, Neil, you said this as well in your section about how you really have seen a change. You have felt it in the numbers, and same with Johanna as well, in the number of applicants. If you could pick one thing that you think has really changed that dynamic from having only 2 applicants for one job or to 250, what would it be? So I'm going to go to, Neil looks contemplative, so I'm going to come to Johanna first.
I'd say it's the ways of working, hybrid working.
Hybrid working. Oh, interesting. Okay, Neil?
I think it's as I mentioned before, it's the way in which you package a vision to make sure it's attractive to the couple of people you're looking for.
Packaging. Okay, Richard?
Yeah, flexibility and encouraging a healthy work-life balance, I think, and pushing that forward is key.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much to our panel. I just want to remind everyone that we will circulate the slides and recordings to you as soon as possible. Also to remind you that the things that you've heard today, we're not just going to close the book and move on to something else. We very much will be engaging with this actively with you in the audience and with those on the panel. Come to our next local authority conference, which is not for a while, not until June, but I think it'll probably be, it'll feel like tomorrow. So keep that in mind, put that date in your diary to help us continue these very important discussions. I guess the last thing really is to thank you, the audience, and our panelists as well for really giving their time to prepare their slides, prepare their talks today, and to answering our questions. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you.